As I sat in the dim light of our living room, the weight of betrayal hung heavy in the air. I could still hear her laughter echoing in my mind, the same laughter that had once filled our home with warmth. But now it felt like a cruel reminder of the love I thought we shared. The moment I discovered the truth, her infidelity with an Uber driver was like a punch to the gut. I had been scrolling through her phone, a habit I had never indulged in before, but something felt off. I stumbled upon a series of messages, innocent on the surface but layered with meaning. The heart emojis, the flirty banter, and the mention of rides taken together painted a picture I never wanted to see. I confronted her, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "Who is this guy? Who is he to you?" I demanded, my heart racing. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock and guilt. There was a moment of silence, a moment where I thought she might deny it, but the truth hung between us like a noose. "It was just one time," she finally admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to happen." Each word cut deeper than the last, twisting the knife of betrayal further into my heart. I could feel my world crumbling around me, the very foundation of trust we had built together now shattered. The days that followed were a blur of anger and despair. I found myself obsessively checking her phone, piecing together the timeline of her betrayal. I replayed the conversations in my head, trying to make sense of how she could do this to me. I felt like a fool, a man betrayed not just by his wife but by the very notion of love itself. Every time I looked at her, I saw the image of her with him, a stranger who had invaded our lives without warning. I had trusted her with my heart, and she had handed it over to someone else. I felt sick, a mixture of nausea and disbelief coursing through me. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. All I could do was replay the scenes of her infidelity in my mind. The image of her laughing and flirting with that Uber driver haunted me. I imagined him behind the wheel, charming her with his casual banter, his easy smile. I could see them together, the way she would have looked at him, the way she would have laughed at his jokes. The thought made my blood boil. Then there was him, the Uber driver. I had to do something. I couldn't let him get away with this. I began tracking his rides, meticulously noting every trip he made. I signed up for the Uber app, creating a fake account just to get a glimpse of his activity. I would sit at my computer, waiting for notifications of his next ride, my heart racing with a mix of anticipation and dread. I was becoming someone I barely recognized, consumed by jealousy and the need for revenge. At first, it was just about gathering information. I wanted to know who this guy was, what made him so special that my wife would betray me. I found out his name, Ethan, a name that seemed too ordinary for the damage he had caused. I learned about his profile, his ratings, and the comments left by passengers. Each five-star rating felt like a dagger to my heart, a reminder that he was thriving while I was drowning in pain. I devised a plan to ensure he never received another five-star rating. I would report him for every little infraction I could find. A late arrival, reported. A missed turn, reported. I felt a surge of satisfaction every time I submitted a complaint, like I was reclaiming a tiny bit of power. But deep down, I knew this wasn't a solution. I was spiraling into a dark place, and the thrill of revenge was quickly overshadowed by the gnawing guilt that followed. What was I becoming? I had started this journey seeking justice, but now I was just a man consumed by anger, losing myself in the process. I couldn't afford to lose sight of who I was, but the pain of betrayal was a powerful motivator. I felt like I was on a collision course with my own morality, and I didn't know how to stop it. As I sat there, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge, I realized that I needed to confront not just my wife's betrayal but my own actions. I needed to find a way to move forward, to reclaim my life and my dignity. But how could I do that when every fiber of my being was screaming for retribution? In the end, I was left with more questions than answers, and the path ahead felt murky and uncertain. The days dragged on, and I found myself trapped in a whirlwind of emotions. Each morning, I woke up with a heavy heart, the memories of her betrayal playing on repeat in my mind. I tried to act normal, to put on a brave face for the world, but inside I was crumbling. My wife, Sarah, would look at me with concern, probably sensing the shift in our relationship, but I couldn't bring myself to talk about it. How could I explain the turmoil I felt? How could I tell her that every time I saw her, I was reminded of the man who had taken something irreplaceable from me? One evening, I found myself sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television. The brightness of the screen felt like a stark contrast to the darkness swirling in my mind. I could hear Sarah in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. It was such a mundane scene, one that would have brought me comfort before. But now it felt foreign, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead I remained silent, trapped in a cage of my own making. I began to reflect on our relationship before the infidelity. We had built a life together, filled with shared dreams, laughter, and love. But now those memories felt tainted. How could she throw it all away for a fleeting moment of passion with a stranger? I thought about our wedding day, the promises we made to each other. The vows of fidelity and love felt like a cruel joke now. In that moment, I realized I was trapped between the love I once had for her and the betrayal that now defined our marriage. The emotional turmoil was suffocating. I was angry, yes, but there was also a deep sadness that settled in my chest. I felt betrayed not just by her, but by the life we had built together. As I sat there, I could feel the weight of my jealousy creeping in, the need to lash out at the man who had taken my wife from me. I needed to know more about him, to understand. What made him a threat to us? Ethan, the Uber driver. I had learned bits and pieces about him, but it wasn't enough. I couldn't let this go. I needed to know who he was, what he looked like, what made him so appealing that Sarah would choose to betray me. I started digging deeper, using social media to gather information. I found his Facebook profile, filled with pictures of him smiling with friends, looking carefree and confident. He was everything I wasn't: young, adventurous, living life on his terms. I felt a mixture of envy and rage. As I scrolled through his posts, I stumbled upon pictures of him with a woman who seemed to be his girlfriend. A pang of relief washed over me. At least he wasn't some charming rogue who would sweep my wife off her feet. But that thought quickly turned sour. Did he know about Sarah? Had he been seeing other women, or was she just another notch on his belt? The thought of him being unfaithful too made me feel slightly better, but it didn't erase the pain I felt. I started to gather information about his rides as well. I wanted to know where he went, who he drove, and how often he picked up passengers. I became obsessed with his routine, tracking every ride he made. It was a twisted form of comfort, knowing I could monitor his every move. I even started to imagine scenarios where I would confront him, where I would stand in front of him and demand to know why he thought it was okay to take what was mine. Each night, I would lie awake, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge. I began crafting an elaborate plan, one that would ensure he never received another 5-star rating. It felt like a game, a way to regain control over my life. I would report him for every little infraction I could find. I had created a fake account on the Uber app, and I would use it to ensure he faced the consequences of his actions. But even as I plotted my revenge, a part of me felt conflicted. I knew that my actions wouldn't heal the wounds Sarah had inflicted. I was becoming consumed by anger, but I didn't know how to stop. Revenge felt like the only way to reclaim my dignity, but it was a slippery slope. I was walking a fine line between justice and obsession, and I could feel myself teetering dangerously close to the edge. One night, I finally decided to confront Sarah. I couldn't keep this bottled up any longer. "Do you even care about what you did?" I asked her, my voice trembling with emotion. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you." Her words felt hollow. I wanted to believe her, but the pain was too fresh, too raw. "How could you do this to us?" I demanded, my heart racing. "How could you betray my trust like that?" She reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. I didn't want her comfort, I wanted answers. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. We stood there, the silence stretching between us like an unbridgeable chasm. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about Ethan. This was about us, about the cracks that had formed in our relationship long before her infidelity. I had to confront not only her betrayal but my own feelings of inadequacy. I had to decide what I wanted for the future. whether I could forgive her or whether revenge was the only path left for me. As I lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, I knew I was at a crossroads. The path I chose would define not just my relationship with Sarah but my own sense of self. I had to choose wisely. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself caught in a cycle of anger and despair. The confrontation with Sarah had left me feeling even more conflicted. I was still reeling from the shock of her betrayal, but I also sensed a shift in her demeanor. She seemed genuinely remorseful, but could I trust her again? I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way. Every time she smiled at me, I was reminded of the laughter she had shared with Ethan, the Uber driver who had stolen a part of my heart. My obsession with Ethan grew. I spent hours tracking his rides, noting every detail. I learned about his favorite hangouts and even the neighborhoods he frequented. Each time I saw a notification that he had picked up a passenger, a sick thrill would course through me. I had become a shadow, lurking in the background of his life, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It was a dangerous game, one that threatened to consume me entirely. He wasn't just an Uber driver, he was my rival, the man who had invaded my life without warning. I imagined him picking up Sarah, his charm wrapping around her like a warm blanket, making her forget about the life we had built together. I pictured their conversations, the way he must have made her feel special and desired. It drove me mad. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I had to be smarter than that. One night, as I sat in front of my computer, I stumbled upon a forum where Uber drivers shared their experiences. I felt a surge of inspiration. What if I could rally other passengers against him? I could create a wave of negative feedback that would ensure he never received another 5-star rating. It felt like the perfect plan, collective revenge. I could paint him as the villain, the man who had betrayed not just me but the trust of every passenger who climbed into his car. I started to draft posts, crafting stories that would paint him in the worst possible light. I told tales of his alleged rudeness, his careless driving, and his lack of professionalism. I felt a rush of power as I hit send, imagining the impact it would have on his ratings. I was no longer just a victim, I was a force to be reckoned with. I didn't care about the moral implications of my actions. I was blinded by the need for revenge. But as the days passed, I began to feel the weight of my actions. Each time I saw his ratings drop, I felt a brief surge of satisfaction, but it was quickly followed by guilt. I was becoming a monster, and the thrill of revenge was fading. I realized that I was not just hurting him, I was hurting myself. I was losing sight of who I was and the man I wanted to be. One evening, I decided to take a break from my plans and went for a walk. The fresh air felt good against my skin, and I tried to clear my mind. As I walked through the neighborhood, I passed by a park where families were gathered, children laughing and playing. It struck me how far removed I had become from that life, the simple joys of happiness and connection. I had allowed myself to be consumed by anger, and in doing so, I was losing the essence of what made life beautiful. I returned home, feeling somewhat lighter but still burdened by the weight of my choices. Sarah was sitting on the couch, her eyes glued to her phone. When she saw me, she put it down and looked at me, concern etched on her face. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I wanted to tell her how I felt, to express my pain and confusion, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I nodded and gave her a weak smile. The truth was, I was okay. I was angry, hurt, and lost. I wanted to confront her about Ethan again, to demand answers, but I hesitated. My mind was a battleground, swinging between wanting to forgive her and wanting to lash out. I had to make a decision. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. I thought about my plan to ruin Ethan's reputation. I thought about how much I had invested in this revenge, and I wondered if it was worth it. What would it change? Would it bring me peace? Or would it only serve to deepen the chasm between Sarah and me? I remembered the vows we had exchanged on our wedding day, the promises of love and fidelity. I had committed myself to her, and she had broken that commitment. But I also realized that two wrongs don't make a right. My revenge wouldn't fix our marriage, it would only drive us further apart. I finally decided to reach out to Sarah. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. She looked at me, her expression shifting from concern to hope. "About what?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "About us," I replied. "About what happened." As we sat together on the couch, I could feel the tension in the air. I had so many questions, so many emotions swirling inside me. I wanted to hear her side of the story, too, understand what led her to betray me, but I also wanted to express my pain and the turmoil I had experienced since discovering her infidelity. "I need to know why," I said, my voice wavering slightly. "What made you do this? Was it something I did? Did you feel unloved?" She looked down, her hands nervously fidgeting in her lap. "I don't know," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I made a terrible mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly. I felt lost and I didn't know how to communicate that to you." Her words resonated with me and I felt a flicker of understanding. I had been so wrapped up in my own pain that I hadn't considered her perspective, but understanding didn't erase the betrayal and I knew I had to tread carefully. "I don't want to lose you," I said, my heart racing, "but I need time to process this. I can't just pretend everything is okay." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. In that moment, I realized that healing wouldn't be easy. It would take time, effort, and honesty from both of us. But I also knew that revenge wouldn't be the answer. I had to let go of my obsession with Ethan and focus on rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of resolve. I had a long road ahead, but I was willing to walk it if it meant finding a way back to each other. I had to confront my anger, my jealousy, and my pain, but I also had to confront the truth. Revenge would not heal my wounds. The following days were filled with a tense atmosphere as Sarah and I navigated this fragile stage of our relationship. We both knew that the road ahead would be challenging. I had taken the first step toward healing by opening up to her, but I still struggled with the images of her with Ethan. The anger simmered beneath the surface, a constant reminder of her betrayal. I had promised myself to focus on our relationship, but the temptation to revert to my vengeful plan was always there, lurking in the shadows. I began to attend therapy sessions on my own, hopping to gain clarity and understanding about my feelings. The therapist encouraged me to explore my emotions rather than suppress them. "You have every right to feel angry and hurt," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "But holding onto that anger will only prolong your pain." I found her words to be both comforting and challenging. I knew I had to confront my feelings, but letting go of my desire for revenge felt like relinquishing control. In those therapy sessions, I also began to think about Ethan as more than just the man who had betrayed me. I realized that my fixation on him was not just about revenge. It was a way to distract myself from the real issues in my marriage. I had to confront my own insecurities and fears, to understand why Sarah's infidelity had hit me so hard. I had always prided myself on being a good husband, but now I was questioning my worth. Had I failed her in some way? Meanwhile, Sarah was making efforts to rebuild our trust. She was open about her feelings and was willing to answer any questions I had, no matter how painful they were. I appreciated her honesty, but each conversation felt like a double-edged sword. I wanted to understand, but the more I learned, the more the wounds reopened. I found myself oscillating between wanting to forgive her and wanting to punish her for her actions. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I decided to confront the issue of Ethan directly. "I need to know more about him," I said, my voice steady but laced with tension. "What was it about him that made you want to step outside our marriage?" Sarah sighed, her expression turning somber. "It wasn't about him, really. It was more about me. I felt lonely and disconnected. I didn't know how to communicate that to you, and when I met him, it was like a momentary escape." Her words cut deep. I had never intended for our relationship to reach that point, and hearing her admit that she felt lonely stung. "But why didn't you come to me?" I asked, my voice rising with frustration. "Why didn't you tell me you were feeling this way?" "I was scared," she admitted. "I thought you would judge me or dismiss my feelings. I didn't want to hurt you." I could see the sincerity in her eyes, and it stirred a mix of empathy and anger within me. I wanted to believe her, but the pain of betrayal was still fresh. "You hurt me more by cheating," I replied, my voice strained. "You didn't give me a chance to fix things." The silence that followed was heavy. We both knew that the trust we had built over the years was now precarious. I had to confront my feelings about Ethan, but I also needed to confront my feelings about Sarah. I didn't want to lose her, but could I truly forgive her? As I lay in bed that night, I found myself thinking about the consequences of my actions. I had been so consumed by revenge that I hadn't considered how it would affect our marriage in the long run. I could continue to sabotage Ethan, but what would that achieve? Would it bring me peace? Would it heal the wounds between Sarah and me? I decided then and there that I had to end my obsession with revenge. I needed to focus on healing and rebuilding our relationship. I had to let go of the anger that had consumed me for so long. It wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to try. The next day, I made a conscious effort to shift my focus. I stopped tracking Ethan's rides and erased the forum posts I had drafted. I felt a strange sense of relief, though the urge to retaliate still lingered in the back of my mind. I knew that my healing wouldn't happen overnight, but I was willing to put in the work. Sarah and I started having deeper conversations about our relationship. We began discussing our needs, our fears, and the areas where we felt disconnected. It was uncomfortable at times, but I could feel a shift in our dynamic. We were becoming more vulnerable with each other, and it felt like a breath of fresh air. I learned to express my feelings more openly, sharing my insecurities and fears about our marriage. I told Sarah how her infidelity had shaken my self-esteem and made me question my worth. To my surprise, she listened without defensiveness, her eyes filled with understanding. "I never wanted to make you feel that way," she said softly. "I was so caught up in my own feelings that I didn't realize how it was affecting you." As we continued down this path of honesty, I began to see glimpses of hope. There were moments where I caught myself smiling at her jokes, moments where we shared laughter and warmth. It was as if we were slowly rediscovering each other, peeling back the layers of hurt and resentment. But the journey was far from linear. There were still moments of doubt and pain. I would catch myself thinking about Ethan, the anger rising within me like a tide. I had to remind myself that he was no longer my focus. My focus had to be on healing my marriage. One afternoon, I decided to take a step further in my healing process. I reached out to Ethan, not to confront him, but to gain closure. I found his social media profile and sent him a message, my heart racing as I typed the words. "I know about you and Sarah. I just want you to know that I'm focused on healing and moving forward. I hope you can respect that." I hit send and felt a mix of anxiety and relief. I had taken control of my narrative, choosing to rise above the anger and bitterness. I didn't know how he would respond, but I felt a sense of freedom in letting go of my need for revenge. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah and I continued to work on our relationship. We made a pact to communicate openly and honestly, to address our feelings as they arose rather than letting them fester. It was a challenge, but we were committed to making it work. I began to realize that forgiveness was a process, not a destination. It wouldn't happen overnight, but I was willing to take it one day at a time. I was no longer focused on Ethan. I was focused on rebuilding the trust that had been broken. In the midst of this journey, I discovered something profound. Healing wasn't just about forgiving Sarah. It was also about forgiving myself. I had to let go of the anger I felt toward her, but I also had to let go of the guilt I carried for my own feelings of inadequacy. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of hope for the first time in a long while. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but I knew that I was on the right path. I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that love, though tested, could still be rebuilt. As the weeks turned into months, I started to feel a shift in my relationship with Sarah. The initial shock and pain of her betrayal had dulled into a deeper understanding of each other. We were learning to communicate more openly, addressing our fears, insecurities, and desires. I could see her making an effort to show me that she was committed to rebuilding our marriage. It was a long and arduous journey, but we were both willing to put in the work. One evening, We decided to have dinner at a small restaurant that held sentimental value for us. It was the place where we had celebrated our anniversaries, a spot filled with memories of laughter and love. As we sat at our table, I felt a sense of nostalgia wash over me. I wondered how many times we had dined here, how many moments we had shared. The ambience was warm, the soft glow of candlelight flickering around us, yet the ghosts of our past still lingered. "I'm really glad we're doing this," Sarah said, breaking the silence. Her voice was filled with sincerity, and I could see the hope in her eyes. "I feel like we're finally starting to connect again." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "Me too. It feels good to talk, to be honest with each other." As we spoke, I could feel the walls I had built around my heart beginning to crumble. I was allowing myself to be vulnerable again, to let her in. We shared stories and laughter, and for the first time in a long while I felt a semblance of normalcy. But there was still a part of me that hesitated, a part that worried about the fragility of our progress. I knew that the road to healing was not linear. It was full of ups and downs, twists and turns. As we finished our meal, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. We had made it through the darkest days, and while we still had a long way to go, I could see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. I was beginning to believe that we could rebuild our marriage, but I also knew that I had to remain vigilant. After dinner, we walked through the nearby park, the cool evening air wrapping around us like a comforting blanket. We strolled hand in hand, and I couldn't help but smile at how far we had come. I had been so consumed by my anger and the desire for revenge that I had almost lost sight of the love we had shared. As we reached a quiet spot by a small pond, I turned to Sarah, my heart racing. "I want you to know that I'm trying to forgive you," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's not easy, but I'm committed to working through this. I want us to be better." Her eyes glistened with tears, and she stepped closer, wrapping her arms around me. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know I hurt you, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of the past. It was about choosing to move forward together. It was about acknowledging the pain while also recognizing the love that still existed between us. However, I couldn't shake the lingering thoughts of Ethan. Although I had decided to let go of my obsession with revenge, I knew I had to confront him one last time. I needed closure, not just for myself but for our relationship. I didn't want to carry the weight of his existence anymore. The next day I took a deep breath and sent Ethan a message. "I hope you're doing well. I wanted to reach out and let you know that I'm focusing on my marriage and moving forward. I hope you can respect that and stay out of our lives." I hit send, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know how he would respond, but I felt a sense of empowerment in taking that step. I was no longer a victim. I was reclaiming my narrative. His reply came a few hours later, and I braced myself for whatever he would say. "I respect your decision. I never meant to hurt you or your marriage. I hope you both find happiness." I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. It was an unexpected response, one that allowed me to let go of any lingering resentment. I had confronted my rival, and in doing so, I had freed myself from the shackles of anger that had bound me for so long. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah and I continued to work on our relationship. We attended couples therapy together, exploring the underlying issues that had contributed to her infidelity. It was challenging, but we were both committed to the process. I found that expressing my feelings in a safe space allowed me to confront my insecurities and fears without judgment. One evening during a therapy session, we were asked to share our individual visions for the future of our marriage. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. "I want us to be stronger than we were before," I said, my voice steady. "I want to rebuild the trust that was broken and create a deeper connection. I want us to communicate openly and honestly about our needs." Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "I want the same thing. I want to be the partner you deserve, and I want to show you that I can be trusted again." As we spoke, I could feel the weight of the past begin to lift. We were no longer defined by her betrayal. We were choosing to define ourselves by our commitment to healing and growth. I realized that while the scars of betrayal would always be a part of our story, they didn't have to dictate our future. In the weeks that followed, I began to notice shifts in our relationship. We were more affectionate with each other, more attuned to each other's needs. We made an effort to prioritize our time together, going on date nights and exploring new activities. It was as if we were rediscovering the joy of being together, and it felt liberating. Yet, the journey was still fraught with challenges. There were moments where the pain would resurface, where I would catch myself feeling insecure or questioning my worth. But instead of retreating into anger, I began to communicate those feelings with Sarah. "I'm feeling insecure today," I would say, and she would respond with love and understanding. It was a process, but with each passing day, I felt a sense of healing wash over me. I was learning to forgive not just Sarah, but also myself. I was learning that it was okay to feel vulnerable, to express my emotions without fear of judgment. As I lay in bed one night, I turned to Sarah, who was curled up beside me. "I feel like we're making progress," I said softly. "I'm starting to believe that we can get through this." She smiled, her eyes shining with hope. "I believe that too. I'm so grateful for your willingness to work on this together." In that moment, I realized that while the road ahead was still uncertain, I was ready to face it with her by my side. We had both learned valuable lessons about love, trust, and the importance of communication. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had chosen to let go of revenge, to focus on healing, and to embrace the journey ahead. The future was still unwritten, but I was ready to write it together, one day at a time. As spring began to bloom around us, I found myself reflecting on the journey Sarah and I had taken since her infidelity. The flowers were starting to blossom, and the world felt alive again, much like my marriage. We had come so far, but I knew we still had miles to go. The scars of betrayal were still there, but they were no longer the defining features of our relationship. Instead, they served as reminders of our resilience and our commitment to one another. We continued to attend therapy, and it had become a safe space for us to express our feelings honestly. One day, our therapist suggested we write letters to each other, letters that expressed our hopes, fears, and desires for the future. It felt like a daunting task, but I was ready to put my thoughts into words. I sat down one evening, pen in hand, and began to write. "Dear Sarah," I started, my heart racing as I poured my thoughts onto the page. "I want to start by saying how much I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to work on our marriage. I never thought we would come this far after everything that happened, but here we are. I want you to know that I see the effort you're putting in, and it means the world to me." As I wrote, I reflected on the lessons I had learned throughout this ordeal. I had learned that love is not just a feeling, it's a choice to be vulnerable, to communicate openly, and to support one another through the toughest of times. I wrote about my hopes for our future, about wanting to build a life together filled with trust, laughter, and understanding. I wanted us to be partners in every sense of the word, supporting each other's dreams and aspirations. After finishing my letter, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It was cathartic to express my feelings, and I couldn't wait to share it with Sarah. The next day, we exchanged letters, and as I read hers, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. She spoke about her remorse and her desire to make things right. She wrote about the love she still felt for me and her commitment to rebuilding our relationship. Tears brimmed in my eyes as I realized how far we had both come. We were no longer defined by the betrayal. We were choosing to define ourselves by our growth and our willingness to forgive. It was a powerful moment, one that solidified my belief that we could overcome this together. As spring transitioned into summer, we began to create new memories together. We took weekend trips, explored new hobbies, and spent lazy afternoons enjoying each other's company. With each passing day, I felt the weight of the past lifting. We were becoming a team again, and it felt incredible. Yet there were still moments of doubt. I would occasionally catch myself replaying the painful memories of Sarah's infidelity, the images of her with Ethan creeping into my mind. But instead of letting those thoughts consume me, I learned to acknowledge them. I would talk to Sarah about my feelings, and she would reassure me, reminding me how far we had come. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch, sipping iced tea, I turned to her, a sense of determination in my voice. I want to move forward and I want us to build a future together, but I need you to know that I'm still healing. I need your patience as I work through this. She nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. I'll always be here for you no matter what. I want us to be happy together and I'll support you through this process. Her words brought me comfort and I realized that healing was not just about letting go of the past. It was also about building a new foundation for our future. We were learning to communicate in ways that we hadn't before, and it felt liberating. As summer faded into fall, I could feel a shift in our relationship. We had learned to navigate the complexities of our emotions, and our love was growing stronger. We were no longer just surviving, we were thriving. One evening, as we sat together watching the sunset, I turned to Sarah, my heart full. I can honestly say that I feel hopeful about our future, I said, my voice steady. I'm excited about what lies ahead for us. She smiled, her eyes sparkling with joy. Me too. I believe we can create something beautiful together. We've come so far, and I know we can keep moving forward. In that moment, I realized that while the journey had been painful, it had also been transformative. We had both learned valuable lessons about love, trust, and the importance of communication. I understood that forgiveness was a continuous process, one that required ongoing effort from both of us. As the leaves began to change colors, I felt a sense of renewal within myself. I had let go of the anger that had consumed me, and I was ready to embrace the future with Sarah by my side. We were building a new life together, one filled with hope, understanding, and love. In the end, I learned that love is not just about the good times, it's about weathering the storms together. It's about choosing to fight for each other, even when the odds seem stacked against you. And while the scars of betrayal will always be a part of our story, they no longer define us. We were writing a new chapter, one filled with resilience and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. As I wrapped my arm around Sarah, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had faced our demons and emerged stronger. The future was still unwritten, but I was ready to write it together, hand in hand. And so we stepped forward into the unknown, armed with love and the knowledge that we could overcome anything, as long as we faced it together.